Yeah, and thank you for giving us that overview. I think that helps a lot of people who aren't necessarily familiar with the generations to have an idea of who they are. In my years as a coach and consultant, I've seen a variety of issues come up among people of different generations at work. What are
Mhm.
some of the most common challenges you've seen among generations in the workplace?
Yeah, the biggest challenge is the caveat that I always give to people when we talk about generations is that one, generations are not monolithic groups. And so even though people may be born in a particular generation, a lot of it depends on their socioeconomic, their culture, their background, their religion, their family upbringing. There's so many influences that somebody may not quote unquote present as a particular generational stereotype. And so it's really important that we not overlay this idea that because you're in this generation, you will automatically behave in a certain way. So these assumptions that we make around generations is one of the sources of conflict, in addition to the idea that every generation thinks they're the best generation. And so what we tend to do is look at what we focus on is what we consider to be the flaws of the other generation or the challenges of the other generation. That immediately puts us at a conflict because we're making these assumptions and are assuming that people are going to operate in a way of being. And so that really causes a charged dialogue and charged communication between them because I was actually I did a talk on this the other day, and we had people in the audience, and I had my millennials say, "Why can't boomers listen?" And the boomers say, "Why do the millennials always think they know everything?" And people actually raised their hand, and it was a perfect example of these generalizations that we enter into conversations with, and then we make assumptions and we start operating on those assumptions, and that's what causes a lot of the conflict. And it's so important for us if we're going to be able to function better generationally, is that we start looking at what generations bring to the table as opposed to operating from this assumption that it's a problem because these generations aren't operating in the same way that we think a generation should operate.
You made a lot of great points, Dr. Carol. I remember when I first started incorporating, talking about generational diversity and different generations in the workforce into our business. And I'm a millennial, as many people know. And the stereotypes were so strong, and they still are, but there would be a lot of
Mhm.
millennials that would tell me, I'm a millennial and I don't even want to be called a millennial because people assume we're lazy. They,
Yes.
attribute all these negative things to us. So to your point about the stereotypes, those are definitely real. Um, and then, also your point about thinking about their generation is the best. I will never forget one of the first few talks I did at a national conference about generations. And one of the gentlemen, he was a baby boomer, he said, "Oh," and this was probably about 2015-ish. So almost 10 years ago now. And he said, "Oh, millennials, we just don't hire those millennials because they quit all the time." And I just, sir, that is not a sound business strategy or way to think about your succession plan. But, to your point about, thinking their generation is the best or having some resistance, around
Yes.
differences, that can definitely come up. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. It is so problematic, and it hurts my heart when I hear people say that. But that is definitely the idea. That millennials or Gen Zs, they have a 2 to 5 year lifespan. And what I always, and it's only because of this idea that boomers have that it's a work ethic. You stay there, you work there, you stay there, you work hard. It doesn't matter if you enjoy it. Doesn't matter if you're valued. Doesn't matter if you're respected. Doesn't matter if you're getting paid. Like
Right.
all of that doesn't matter. It's that you have a job and you work the job. Whereas what millennial generations are bringing to the table is that no, the reason I'm leaving is because you're not walking your values. You're not supporting my development. You're not creating an environment where I feel safe and acknowledged. I'm not doing work where I feel valued or am being valued for the work that I'm putting forth. And so what I always tell, so I'm a boomer, and what I always try to share with my boomer colleagues is that what we're trying to do is fit these round pegs in a square hole. And what we have to start thinking about is how to not make the hole square, but how to soften the edges so that we are thinking about how to create an environment and a culture that supports the people that are there versus trying to make them fit into the culture that we've created that is no longer operating in the current landscape of work and definitely not in the future of work.
An amazing point, Dr. Carol. I think that some of our listeners might need to pause and listen to that again. So thank you for sharing.